I wrote 3 Roman numerals for my speech. One is, how did it come to be? 2, how is it moving philosophically? And 3, where I think it's going. So you can stop me. I don't have it written. So if you want to stop me and ask a question, please feel free to do so. I really have to put distance education in a context. So I'll take you back just in a little history of the university. So you'll see that it was done because economically we needed some way to move from where we started to where we had to go. And notice I said had to go, not because we wanted to go, it was a necessity. We started this university at the PhD level. The thought was that we would bring in first-class professors, and they would be funded through the university, and they would then bring in the resources necessary to be able to bring 2 or 3 or 4 doctoral students in and be supported on the research monies that they brought in from the government or from other locations. That was the start of this institution. We were going to be the MIT of the South. And we started, and each year, we started, by the way, with 17 students in 3 fields, 1 in oceanography, 1 in physics, and 1 in science education, which was my own field. And it didn't take long before we realized that that model was not going to work. And the reason it wasn't going to work is we were late for the science since Sputnik had gone up, and the money was spent between 57 and 67, and here we were starting in 67. And it also was difficult to bring research professors here since we were located in 232 Las Olas Boulevard and 336, which is where my office was, and there were no buildings out here, and there was no place for them to go, even if they came. So when I was asked to become the leader of the institution in 69, I used 69 as a way of going back to my colleagues at Harvard and Berkeley and other places where I knew people. I couldn't get a physicist to come here. I couldn't get a first-class research scientist to come here. So I came back and said to the board, we can't become the MIT of the South, so if you'll give me some opportunity, I'll try to do what I could to help the university. And it just so happened that I was a science educator, and the reason they asked me to come was they needed someone to kind of in education who had a science background. And I graduated CCNY in biochemistry and then became a teacher through the MAT program at NYU, etc. So it was natural for them to look for a science educator. And although I was successful at Berkeley, they were shooting golf at 65, and it made no difference whether I was there or not. They were still going to shoot golf at 65. And so this presented a challenge which I felt could make a difference. So with that background, in 1970, I had to do something to bring in revenue and get past SACS accreditation. And it just so happened that in 68, 69, during that summer, I had an opportunity to do something in Hartford, Connecticut, because I was friendly with Medill Bear, who was a superintendent of schools at Hartford. And Medill was also the superintendent of schools in Lenox when I went to Harvard, and I knew him from Berkeley because he was a superintendent in Carmel, and it just so happens he was also then become superintendent in Hartford. So I was a consultant. I was able to bring my doctoral students up to Hartford to do research and become part of that activity. So I had a way of funding them so they could eat, and because none of our doctoral students paid tuition. They all had free tuition. So when you look at that environment, having taken over an institution in 1970, we had to do something that was unique. And in '69, during that summer, I had brought 16 principals from Hartford together for a summer institute. They actually became teachers that summer. They taught students from Hartford, Connecticut. They taught 2 different kinds of subjects, one a behavioral research lab, self-paced, and another was the Odo Carini kits, which enabled them to work in pairs, and so that principals taught in the morning, half planned, half taught. We videotaped them like you're doing now. And in the afternoon, we would look at the behavior of the students and look at their behavior, and critique what was going on in the classrooms. And Harvard said they wanted to evaluate the summer program, and they did that. And they found that the principals who had been in the program were talking about the things they were doing. By the way, they came in December, so that principals had a chance to be in their positions. And what they found was in the schools where the principal had gone to the Summer Institute, they were speaking about the things they were doing, the new things they were trying within the schools. And the principals who were not in that summer program were talking about why they couldn't do what they thought they'd like to do. So they were focusing on why things weren't going on in their school and the nature of change, while the principals who had gone to the Summer Institute were talking about the things they were trying to implement, etc. So with that background and having to come up with some way of doing something different, I had my colleague from Lou Rubin, who was from Illinois, down here, and we decided we'd write a proposal to SACS, which was the accrediting agency, and do something that was economically viable, both from a cost point of view and from a recruitment point of view. So rather than ask students to come physically here, we decided we would bring the university to where they were. And so we formed clusters. And we started with clusters, 1 in California and 3 in Florida. And Lou taught curriculum, and I taught supervision. And what the organizational structure of the distance education was that the same professors would teach that particular subject no matter where the cluster was. So we had uniformity in terms of expectations. And so we each picked 2 other professors to work with us, and I took the one here in Miami and one in Jacksonville, and Lou took the 2 others, and we switched. So that gave us 6 months. Of course, each cluster lasted 3 months. That gave us 6 months to build the balance of the programs and see what we really wanted to do. And we brought in a man by the name of Bill Applebaum, who was a person at Harvard Business School, to head up the practicums. So we had 3 people being paid here, and then we had adjunct faculty for all the rest of what we were doing. So we didn't have to pay fringe benefits. We paid them. They left for home on a Friday night. They flew to the cluster, taught all day Saturday. Some stayed over Saturday night and went home Sunday. Some didn't. They went home Saturday night. And the telephone and the jet was the technology being used.